David Brewster here with a new episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Lȧās Rockit. And this episode is going to kick off the month of October, which is Metal Month here on my channel, and I am stoked. I'm so excited. I've been thinking and planning for this since last year, and this year we're going to basically combine, metal and horror. And there's a lot of examples of this, historically speaking, when metal music kind of combines with horror movies or books or, video games. And there's lots of examples of this, either music appearing on a horror film soundtrack, or band members actually appearing in a horror film, or maybe music based around, horror movies or books, Poe and Lovecraft and Stephen King and people like that. So there's lots of examples of this, and Laaz Rockit's definitely a great example. They fit the bill perfectly. A legendary Bay Area thrash band. They formed in 1981. 6 studio albums, 1 live album, and 1 very famous song connected with a very famous horror franchise. So if you're a metal fan, a horror fan, a fan of this time of year, fall and Halloween, this episode's totally for you. So Laaz Rockit may not be a household name in today's world, but they're definitely an essential thrash band. They're part of the Big Six of the Bay Area thrash metal bands, alongside groups like Exodus, Testament, Death Angel, Violence, Forbidden, and Laaz Rockit. Definitely a historical band. And definitely in those early days of thrash on the West Coast, Laaz Rockit played a lot of shows, and that was in their early years, like the early 80s. And that also explains why Ride the Lightning's on the wall right there. I don't have any Laaz Rockit on vinyl. I tried to track some down, but their albums are really hard to find. But I basically just substituted Metallica because they do have an early history playing shows with Laaz Rockit. Now, as far as their horror connection, basically Laaz Rockit recorded and released the song Leatherface for the movie Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. That was in 1990. It's not really a very good film. I love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, franchise, but I'm not really that big of a fan of 3. It's okay. Leatherface, it looks like he's wearing a burnt Stouffer's lasagna, for a mask. It just looks kind of weird. And, but Viggo Mortensen, from Lord of the Rings, he's actually in that film too. But Leatherface, the song, was penned by Laaz Rockit. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 5 Laaz Rockit related albums, and that includes 4 of their studio releases, and then also the soundtrack from Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. And like I mentioned during the intro, they've released 6 studio albums in their career, but I'm only pulling music from 4 of those albums, and there's some great chord work hiding in this episode. Some thrashy riffs, we're going to be slapping some harmonics, there's some nylon string stuff, so buckle up, here we go. With the opening, that's Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3, Leatherface. And I actually featured this riff in the Heavy Metal Horror episode, that was 2 years ago. But since we're talking about Laaz Rockit, I had to include this again since it's Metal Month. And there's 2 guitars, and you'll notice, like in Laaz Rockit's music, sometimes the guitars kind of split off and they're doing different things. So the first guitar is doing this. Right? So you're basically playing an E flat 5. Think of an E power chord, but we're going to lower the 5th, that B, to B flat. So it's basically a 3-note E flat 5, like that. Strum that, and you're going to basically slide it down, and then you're going to catch this B flat, flat 5 down there. So it's really interesting that here we've got E and B flat and E, right? For that E flat 5. E, B flat, and E flat. Or E, B flat, and E. And we take that chord and slide it down here. Now we've got B flat, E, and B flat. So it's the same 2 notes, but in reverse order. Because we had this, and then that, right? And then a heavy mute. And the heavy mute right there is B flat to B, and then E flat to E, right? And when you get to that higher E5, then bang on a lower E5 right there. Do it again. Right. That's repeated and looped over and over, and then you hear this super heavy second guitar come in. It sounds like Jaws or something, and he's really just doing the other guitar does the flat 5, chord riff. And that, that chord part right there, it's heavily palm muted, very thrashy and very heavy. And it's really just, an E flat over B flat to an E over B. And then that's, that's like a D flat over A flat back to that B over E. So you're really just kind of doing this alternating like that. Play that late at night and your neighbors are gonna hate you, but that's the riff right there. And then listening to how those two come together, I mean, they're technically playing totally different rhythms, but I was looping that first guitar part and it's something like this. Really interesting because you hear that chonk chonk when they come together, and then you hear them kind of separate and then they chonk chonk when they come together. Cool riff, cool song, and definitely I had to include that. It's Leatherface. Next up's the song I've Got Time. This is from the album No Stranger to Danger, and it's a single note riff with some moshy power chords like this. Something like that. So it starts with 2 hits on that E5, and then you pause, and you hit it again, and everybody's hitting right there. And there's nothing, and then you do it again. And then you've got this. It's basically like an E minor based, single note riff. So you're banging on that low E, and then this, A to F sharp to G. And you're doing that low E, the single note kind of back and forth. And then it's the low E with this D, F sharp to E. And then the low E with this B flat and that C note. And you're going to basically target that C twice. And then play with that low E and that D, F sharp, E again right there. Right. So that's the main riff right there. Do it again. And then right there, kind of moshing your way through that, the low E, and then that G power chord to the low E, that A power chord to the low E, and then that B power chord. Right? And you can do it again. Next up's the song Last Breath. This came from the album Know Your Enemy, and it's something like this. Something like that. So it basically starts, this is what I came up with. It's partial chords, like the top part of like that B flat power chord, but it's that part the first time through. And then when you hear it repeated, it comes back. And the whole band is just going ape right there. Especially the drummer. Check out the drummer's going crazy. But you're doing... And I'm hearing it that way the first couple times. Kind of hitting like that sustained, F sharp over C sharp right there. So you do like 2 passes through that. And then I hear it switch, to regular power chords right there, the same riff, that B flat to A to A flat to G G to G flat like that. And then the verse starts, and the guitar and the vocal part are actually playing the same kind of riff, but he's doing so it's like B to C to a G, and then that D to E flat, and E flat again. Second time, do that B flat to F to E5 like that. But definitely very aggressive, hyperactive, and I love riffs like that. Next up's the song Dead Man's Eyes. This came from the album City's Gonna Burn, and it's totally this Van Halen inspired slapped harmonic thing, like this. Like that, and it's basically based around like D minor, and it moves to C minor, and we're just doing the same thing, you know, in two different positions right there. But he's basically doing these slapped harmonics. So wherever we're fretting, you know, the fret hand's doing, right, and that's the riff. Instead of playing it like that, we're slapping harmonics 12 frets higher. Right? Something like that. And then do the exact same thing down a whole step. Now we're in C. Right? And do it like that. Now, speaking of slapped harmonics, next up's Most Dangerous Game. This is from the album Know Your Enemy. I'm using a clean tone, and this is really cool. Something like this. So it's really cool, and once again we're slapping harmonics. So we're basically playing with this E sus2 right here. Right? It's like an E sus2 to that C sharp 11 right there, or that C, that F sharp, and the open G. Right? And then doing it like that. We're actually slapping harmonics, and we're going to basically mirror what we're doing 12 frets higher, and we're going to be doing this, but we're doing it like that. And I was just kind of playing with my index and middle finger. You could actually do 3 fingers there if you want to kind of spell that out like that, but you're literally slapping those harmonics and making those notes kind of pop out like that. And then for that C sharp 11, you know, kind of get ready for it, and then you're going to do, so it's the A, you know, the A string, the D string, and then twice on the G right there for that C, F sharp, and 2 Gs. And then the low E, that C note, and then G to F sharp walking down and taking you back to that E sus2. I love stuff like that. That's so cool. but not least, a Shadow Company. This came from the album Annihilation Principle, and this is played on a nylon string guitar. I'm also going to use a pick for this, so it's a little bit louder for my microphone, but I suspect they used a pick in the studio version. But Shadow Company, something like this. Like that, keeps going, it moves to F sharp, keeps going. But I love chord progressions like this, and you know, when basically the top part of a chord remains, but then the bass note changes, and you're hearing all these implied chords move by. So right there we've got a B5, and we're doing this kind of, you know, root note, top note, middle note kind of picking pattern like that. And then we're going to change that B root note to a G. So that B5 is going to change to a G major 7 implied right there. Like that. And that G is going to move to F sharp. Now it's an F sharp sus4 implied. And then that F sharp is going to move to an E. And now it's an E sus2 implied. And then back to that F sharp. And then just stay on that F sharp 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then do all that again. Right there when you get to that E, now that chord's going to move back to a B flat 5 and do that 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then start it again. Basically just kind of going between that B, that G, that F sharp, that E, and you're kind of moving between that E, F sharp, and G, and then you just end on that F sharp sus4 like that. Like that, and it kind of rings for a minute, and then they go in the next part. But like I said, I love chord progressions like that where you're just moving the bass note, but you're hearing all these implied chords, and that's actually a really cool song, too. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the Chords of Lȧās Rockit. Definitely a very influential and important band, even though in today's world they're nearly forgotten. But I haven't forgotten about these guys. And hopefully, you know, for viewers out there, if you were familiar with Laaz Rockit, hopefully I did them justice. And if you're new to Laaz Rockit's music, check them out. Definitely a great band. If you like metal and thrash, especially early 80s thrash, Laaz Rockit's your band. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to the Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.